Joining us right now is Jason Foster. He's the founder of Empower Oversight and also a former chief investigative counsel for the Senate Judiciary Committee. So you've seen this stuff before, Jason. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the invite.
You hear from Democrats right now and some members of the media that there's no reason for this impeachment inquiry because Merrick Garland has empowered David Weiss to be a special counsel. Let him do his job. How are they wrong about that?
Well, throughout history, that's been a frequent excuse that the Justice Department tries to hide behind when trying to avoid congressional oversight. But you know, there's no that's not a constitutional basis to defy a subpoena or refuse to provide information. In fact, the reason for congressional oversight is to act as a check on the executive branch and the abuse of power in the executive branch, and that includes the power to prosecute or the power to not prosecute when it's being selectively enforced, as is the allegation with the president's son and the whistleblowers having disclosed that basically the Justice Department pulled punches and was not honest with the public about who was in charge of making the final decision. Attorney General Merrick Garland was very clear. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that complicates this and people get confused with all the details. But the bottom line is this. The Attorney General assured the public there'd be no political funny business with this and Biden appointees would not be handling it. Mr. Weiss, who was a Trump appointee, would be handling it. Well, as we know from the testimony of the whistleblowers, that's not true. And as we have learned recently from the testimony of an assistant special agent in charge in the Baltimore field office of the FBI, who's confirmed our client's testimony, that's not true.
Yeah, and this is critically important because it was, in fact, Biden appointees who were standing in the way. This is classic obstruction of justice. Even if you think that Mr. Weiss, and I don't at this point think Mr. Weiss is an independent actor, you could make the argument that he's a Trump appointee, so, there's some distance there. But this testimony that you're referring to, and I'd love for you to flesh it out, specifically says that it was Biden appointees who were protecting the big guy.
Yes. Well, so there have been recently some transcripts, provided to the press by folks on both sides, although the transcript's not available in full for the public to read yet. But, they've been interviewing all the people who were in the October 7th, 2022 meeting, along with Gary Shapley, our client, the IRS whistleblower, the IRS supervisor. He has contemporaneous notes that say that in that meeting, Weiss admitted that he wasn't the ultimate decider, as he has claimed in his public letters to Congress. There were 7 people in that meeting, including Gary, and the House Judiciary Committee and Ways and Means Committee have been interviewing those people. They've interviewed, I believe, 4 of them so far. And recently there have been reports by one of the people who was in the room, which was the FBI Assistant Special Agent in charge. And, she confirmed, that key detail that in fact, the charges, when they had that meeting on October 7th, one of the things they were discussing was the fact that the charges had been presented to the DC U.S. Attorney, Matthew Graves, who's a Biden appointee, and that Matthew Graves had declined to bring the charges in his district. So Mr. Weiss was not, but the fact that he subsequently allowed the statute of limitations to expire on those charges in that district without ever bringing it, although he had endorsed bringing those charges to the investigative team privately, means that he was thwarted from doing what he wanted to do by the Biden appointee in a case involving Hunter Biden, the president's son.
And potentially Joe Biden. By the way, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, was specifically asked by Chuck Grassley, the senator on the Judiciary Committee, specifically asked not just whether Mr. Weiss would be able to bring charges, but I remember Senator Grassley specifically said, if it's in another jurisdiction and it's another U.S. attorney's call, will he have that power? And Merrick Garland affirmed that. Not only the District of Columbia, also the Central District of California. Apparently some of these tax charges would have been activated in California because Hunter Biden lived there. Martin Estrada, U.S. Attorney for Central District, decided not to bring those charges that were recommended. That's another Biden appointee. This is a problem in the Justice Department. It's not just a problem with Hunter Biden and his laptop. There's a problem in the Justice Department, it seems, Mr. Foster.
Right. I mean, there was a clear conflict of interest, and both, at the time that Mr. Garland answered those questions under oath, these U.S. attorneys who were appointed by Mr. Biden had already declined charges in those districts at the time he was speaking. So, I mean, the bottom line is this is a clear conflict of interest. You can't have a Biden appointee participating in any way in the decision about whether to charge President Biden's son. It's an obvious, clear conflict. And Mr. Garland had sworn for years and continues to swear that that he would not allow that conflict to occur. And in fact, the Justice Department had allowed that conflict to occur. They hid and obfuscated from the public that conflict had occurred. And when the whistleblowers disclosed that the conflict had occurred, they were removed from the case in retaliation for their protected disclosures.
Yeah. And by the way, this also contradicts Mr. Weiss's sworn statement. He said that he had the powers and the ability to bring these charges, and clearly he did not. So he is part of the problem, as I said. Sarah Bedford at Washington Examiner has an article yesterday. Hunter Biden accusers face accusations. At least a half dozen people who've come forward with claims of evidence, whistleblowers, are now facing sanctions, indictments, efforts to label them as corrupt. This is classic retaliation against whistleblowers, and I know this is incredibly important to you at Empower Oversight. What can you tell us more about that?
Well, I mean, I can only tell you about what's happened with our client, which is that the president's son's attorneys have been constantly haranguing against them, accusing them falsely of having violated grand jury 6E secrecy rules, having violated tax secrecy rules. All of that is false. We followed the procedures. There's authorization in statute to go and disclose this kinds of information to the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee, which we followed scrupulously. So, in the litigation in Delaware, they even filed this frivolous motion trying to get all the information sealed when the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee had submitted copies of the whistleblowers' transcripts to the judge to consider in the plea hearing. And in those motions, they argued that Gary had improperly disclosed grand jury information, which of course he had not, and the judge slapped them down, ruled against them, and basically said you can't just make a general charge like that. Yeah. Well, I mean, in addition to what they've done openly and publicly, we also have heard from multiple sources, including the New York Times reporter, that they've written letters and emails to the Justice Department privately, lobbying their client's father's Justice Department to prosecute our client for blowing the whistle on special treatment for the president's son.
It's the whole reason why whistleblower laws are in place right now, to protect people like your client. And also, you're seeing talking points, some of them distributed from the White House, that suggest that your client and other whistleblowers have changed their stories over time. I haven't seen any actual facts to back that up. Are you concerned that the White House counsel's office using the power of the White House now to try to get a different narrative into the media that could damage your client's reputation?
Well, I mean, that's always to be expected. I mean, and that's why Gary, had multiple months of sleepless nights before. During, and after the process of coming forward, because he knew he was going, and that's what happens when a whistleblower comes forward. You're one person standing athwart the establishment, telling the truth that nobody wants you to tell, that they don't want people to hear. And so obviously there are going to be repercussions, both direct and indirect, subtle, in your face, all kinds of activities. I mean, we're a small nonprofit. The other side has virtually limitless resources, not only Hunter Biden's attorneys, but, the Justice Department attorneys, all working to protect Merrick Garland and David Weiss from these accusations.
Empower Oversight, you can see the URL there, defendwhistleblowers.com, if you can do what you can to check them out, check out their good work and help them out, because, yeah, they're going to need a little bit more in legal fees. Thank you, Jason Foster. Great to talk with you.